Today, we're going to talk about Trump screwing himself with a really misguided comment during his primary fight against DeSantis. And I've got two interviews this week. I interviewed U.S. Senate candidate in Texas, Colin Allred, about his response to Ted Cruz's stance on abortion, how he plans on overcoming Beto's margin in the state, and how to bring Texas's Latino voters back into the fold. And I'm joined by Democratic candidate for Attorney General in Mississippi, Greta Kemp-Martin, about the massive scandal that Mississippi Republicans are dealing with right now, and how that deep red state might actually be poised for a flip this next election cycle. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So Ron DeSantis is reportedly jumping into the race this week. I've seen dates of the 24th, the 25th, the 29th, all of which is to say it's likely happening within days. And what's especially significant about this is the impact that it's having on Trump. Because thanks to this perceived threat by Ron DeSantis, Trump is now forced to continue running to the right. And so because of that, this is a little tidbit that we got just days ago.
And I want to ask also, do you think that 6 weeks is going too far? Is that going to doom Republicans with the moderates in this country when it comes to 2024?
Well, Rob, first of all, I'm the one that got rid of Roe v. Wade, and everybody said that was an impossible thing to do. I put on 3 Supreme Court justices. Very few people have had that privilege or honor, and they are terrific people, and they happen to believe that Roe v. Wade should not be there. It's been now brought back to the states. And what I've done is I've given the pro-life people, who are wonderful people and loving people, I've given them the power of negotiation, because now they're able to negotiate something that's going to be very important.
Yep, nothing like their frontrunner for the Republican nomination coming out and owning up to the least popular decision in modern American history. Like, let's be clear. Because of the Dobbs decision overturning Roe, which Trump just took full credit for, Republicans turned a midterm election cycle where Democrats had full control of government, which history almost always promises would be a rout for Republicans, and a dismal approval rating for Biden. They turned that into the worst midterm performance for a party out of power in our lifetimes. Their big red wave devolved into failing to flip the Senate and taking the House by a margin so small that McCarthy is now forced to cling on to people like George Santos. That's how slim their majority is. So this notion that Trump would take credit for that, for overturning Roe, doesn't exactly bode well for the guy if he eventually heads into the general election. And yet, this really isn't that big of a surprise, given the fact that the only way to win a Republican primary to even be able to get the general election is to just sprint so far to the right that you fall off a cliff. Even on the off chance that Ron DeSantis comes out of this primary cycle ahead of Trump, that guy also just signed a 6-week abortion ban into law. And that's to say nothing of his Don't Say Gay law, which bans the acknowledgement of the existence of LGBT Americans in the classroom. Is to say nothing of his voter fraud task force, which has been rounding up mostly minority Floridians and arresting them when they thought they could vote legally. And the list goes on. So these guys will continue to outflank each other on the right, all the while racking up these records that are so extreme they're making Ronald Reagan look like a communist. And so as we head into 2024, we got to be able to toe the line between recognizing that A, yes, Trump and DeSantis are not making their lives any easier by trying to outflank each other constantly, but also B, that they can still win. And so I know it's easy to be like, damn, these guys are just screwing themselves for the general. And to be clear, I wholeheartedly believe that that is what they're doing. But we'd be crazy to think that either one of them couldn't still win a general election. These things are decided by like a few thousand votes in 4 states, that's all. And who knows what can happen between now and November 2024. So let's not pretend that we have anything in the bag. So our job is the same. It's to keep calling this stuff out, to keep making sure that everyone is aware of the extremism that has pervaded the GOP, from abortion bans to book bans to LGBT bans to campus voting bans to student ID bans to even right now, where they're trying to make the U.S. default on its debt. The damage that they can cause with even the smallest amount of power is remarkable. And the damage that they have caused in places where they do have power is unmistakable. From Florida to Texas, these Republicans are turning their states into these little Christo-fascist fever dreams. So if Trump wants to brag about banning abortion to win the primary, we should make sure that everyone remembers that when the primary is actually over. Here's a clip from my interview with Colin Allred. Ted Cruz has come out in support of banning abortions in all cases, even in cases of rape or incest. Is that where the people of Texas stand as far as abortion rights are concerned?
No, it's not. And, my wife and I have had 2 babies in Texas in the last 5 years. And, you hold your breath throughout that entire process. Every time you have to go to the doctor and have a test done or an ultrasound, you're hoping that the doctor's going to tell you that it looks fine. And I can't imagine if during that process we had run into a problem that then needed to have some kind of action taken. And the question wouldn't be whether or not it was the best thing for my wife's health or even maybe for the baby's health, but what politicians in Austin or folks like Ted Cruz think should be done. And it's the extremism of the position that if you're raped or a victim of incest, there's nothing you can do about it. And also just the fact that it doesn't trust women to make their own decisions about their bodies. Texans have a long history of believing in leaving folks alone, and we're believing building independence and basically going our own way. This is the opposite of conservatism. It's reaching into these most intimate and important decisions and telling folks what they can and can't do.
And here's a clip from my interview with Greta Kemp-Martin. Current governor Tate Reeves has his fingerprints all over this welfare scandal that you alluded to before. His administration fired the U.S. attorney that was responsible for bringing the suit. He protected the Athletic Foundation, which is composed of a bunch of his donors from the lawsuit. His fitness trainer was reported to have received $1 million that was funneled to him. This is just overt corruption, again, exactly as you mentioned, at the expense of the most vulnerable Mississippians, the poorest Mississippians in the poorest state. What should happen here?
Very simple. The Attorney General should do her job and initiate an investigation and prosecute where needed. The problem is that my opponent has positioned herself in the middle of this extremist Republican agenda. She does not want to anger her Republican friends. She does not want to anger her Republican donors or her NFL quarterbacks. She doesn't want to do that because she knows that she is a gold star student for the Republican Party, and she in no way wants to ruffle those feathers. So what that has caused her to do is completely shirk her responsibilities and go after this corruption. You should attack corruption, whether it comes from a Democrat, a Republican, an independent. The Attorney General is there to represent the people of Mississippi, and Mississippians were harmed by this scandal. I mean, you're talking almost $100 million in stolen funds from the Temporary Assistance for Needy Family Fund. That is things that Mississippians on the ground need. But again, my opponent doesn't know that because she's completely disconnected from the realities that Mississippians are facing.
Yeah. To a broader degree, this kind of underlies the problem here, which is that Mississippi ranks 49th in economy, 49th in quality of life, 50th in poverty. Is there no acknowledgement from Mississippians that their current leader that there is a link between the current leadership that they've chosen and the results of what that leadership has brought onto the state?
That's a really good point. Sometimes I read this data and I'm like, are people reading the same things that I am? Specifically, are our state leaders not seeing the same data that I am? And I'll be perfectly frank. I believe that Mississippians, for the first time in at least my lifetime, have a slate of Democratic candidates that they can believe in. We have a top of the ticket with Brandon Presley, who has brought such a dynamic movement to this state, unprecedented polling this close to Governor Reeves this early in an election cycle. It's just been amazing to see the movement that he has brought. So my hope is that this will motivate Mississippians to turn out. Mississippi had the lowest voter turnout of any state in the country last year. And we are hoping that we can bring both Brandon Presley, myself, Shawaski Young, who's running for Secretary of State, and other Democratic candidates, we can bring out those motivating factors because it is time to have a fresh start with our state leadership and dig out the corruption that's going on in Jackson.
To check out the full interviews with both Colin Allred and Greta Kemp-Martin, click the thumbnails right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. And you can also find the link to the audio version of this podcast on the screen. And finally, to see more of my content, you can click the link to subscribe to my channel on the screen as well.